Oh, cool, cool. All right. Woo!
All right. Carry through
We're not actually allowed to do any what they call productive work on site with the companies that I work for.
And walking.
Keep going.
Oh, good lead. Yay!
I watch boxing, and I know there's a couple of documentaries.
You're gonna have to get yourself up to Cape Breton.
What's that?
That's it. Finish line.
The governor's
Loving it. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's totally
known as folk soul music. But their real band name is Granny D's Personal Marching Band. And they accompany Granny D everywhere. Take it away.
Howdy, everybody. We're the folk soul duo. And I would like to commend the Walkers, take this opportunity. Persistent in these cold temperatures, I'm sure attested their resolve. I also want to thank Ruth Meyer for connecting us to this event and oldest friends. So we're going to start with a song I wrote, and this one is about the brave folks who came to discover America many years ago. It's called Gotta Be a Place. Set out to ease their mind, looking for what no one could find. Far away they could forget old regrets. Take no rest, take no rest, take no rest. The soldiers they rode for the south. Sun to the north, but the sailors they went west to the west, to the west. Take no rest, take no rest, take no rest. Their voice from deep in the night called them to follow that light. There's no one here save but you. No one to ask if it's true, if it's true, if it's true. Gotta be a place, gotta be a place, gotta be a place. Could explain. Gotta be a place, gotta be a place, gotta say where they're gone, or if they were right or wrong. You look for the good and the true within you, within you. There's gotta be a place, gotta be a place, gotta be a place. The lost, the forgotten, the found, still haunt the winds with their sound. Song they sing is always the same. Say the way. Gotta be a place, gotta be a place, gotta be a place. Take no rest, take no rest, take no rest. Say the way, say the way, say the way. Gotta be a place, gotta be a place. Take no rest, take no rest, take no rest. Gotta be a place, take no rest.
So, if you look at your yellow song sheets, you'll see a song that I wrote for Granny Dee the week that she died. I didn't know that I was writing it the week that she died, but I was. So we have sung it in several locations since then. I like to think that it floats up to her wherever she is.
And it's kind of a gospel tune, so it has these answers. And you'll see, because I'm on the answer as well. So if you would like to join in on the chorus and on the gospel answers, it would sound super.
Or even sing the whole darn thing. It starts out with slow walking,
So don't worry about this part.
and then it gets kind of cheerful walking. If you think you want to make a difference and move on to something new ahead, just you put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be doing just what Granny Dee has said. If you want to get folks all together for a timely task, to work as one, just like this right here today. Just you put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be doing just what Granny Dee has done. Walking down the road, everybody, doing something good. Walking down the road, she believed she could. Walking down the road, and she's giving us a smile. We'll be wearing it for many and many a mile. Yes, if you want to walk across the country, walk across the country, and talk to people in their towns beneath the sun, underneath the sun. Well, you got
road. She believed she could, walking down the road. And she's given us a smile. We'll be wearing it for many and many a mile. Many miles. Walking down the road, doing something good. Walking down the road, she believed she could. Walking down the road, and she's giving us a smile. We'll be wearing it for many and many a mile. Yes, if you lift your voice while you are walking, and maybe try a dancing step or two. Well, you know the mighty echoes of the land resound. We'll be bringing back that joyous song to you. Walking down the road, doing something good. Walking down the road, she believed she could. Walking down the road, and she's giving us a smile. We'll be wearing it for many and many a mile. Yes, we'll be wearing it for many and many a mile. Many a mile. We're going to play a couple songs that we played walking on the road with Granny D.
These are some of the best parade tunes, and I'm sure they'll be familiar to you. You are welcome. Sing on these as well.
So when we first started playing for Granny D, we said to ourselves, of course, she needs a marching band. And that was all the logic we needed to go ahead and follow her.
shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Gonna have bloody war no more. Ain't gonna study 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 war no more. Yes, I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Well, I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 I ain't gonna study war
Oh, Lord, you're still with us. Take it off.
I can see it clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that held me blind. Gonna be a bright, 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 sunshine day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me down. It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. Yes, it's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. Yes, it's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day.
So those were a couple of the tunes we paraded around the state with. And then there's, of course, is this one, which we made up on the spur of the moment on the very first parade that we joined her on, which was 4th of July parade in Amherst, New Hampshire.
Yes,
And
and
we thought, well, what are we going to play? So we came up with these words, and they have been immortalized. And they are on your piece of paper, and we hope you'll join in with us.
respect to all our great speakers by giving you chapter and verse for all they've accomplished. To start us off, and bringing us a proclamation from Governor Maggie Hassan, is a true leader. She speaks truth to power. She's very feisty. Here she comes. In a Granny D tradition. You should have seen her on the Senate floor. It was a pleasure. Standing up and defending Medicaid expansion against the big money script right out of Washington. Please welcome the Honorable Senator from Nashua, Becky Gilman.
All right.
Gordon, and thank you everybody that turned out today in this code. Particularly thank you to the walkers. I'm here really to bring the best wishes of our great governor of our great state, Senator Hassan, and Senator Betty Lasky. I don't know where she is, but she is the other senator that represents Nashua, and she and I both say, from the New Hampshire State Senate, we thank you. But I'm here to read this proclamation. The state of New Hampshire by Her Excellency Margaret Wood Hassan, Governor. A proclamation. Doris Granny D. Haddock Day, today, January 24, 2014. Whereas Doris Granny D. Haddock, born Ethel Doris Rollins and raised in Laconia, New Hampshire, before spending much of her career working in Manchester and retiring to Dublin, would have celebrated her 104th birthday on January 24, 2014. Happy birthday. And whereas Granny D. Haddock is a national icon who will be remembered for a lifetime of unshakable commitment to social and environmental justice everywhere, including the key role she played in 1960 to save an Alaskan Inuit village from destruction as part of Project Chariot, as well as the role she played 2 decades later in preventing the costly and environmentally destructive construction of a major east-west highway throughout the southern part of New Hampshire. And whereas Granny D. Haddock captured international attention with her 3,200-mile walk at the age of 90 across America for campaign finance reform. Her 23,000 miles of travel to register disenfranchised voters, her run for the United States Senate at the age of 94, and the exemplary nonpartisan leadership she provided for legislation to enable all qualified citizens to hold elected office. Whereas Granny D. entered her 2nd century with zeal, completing another book, writing speeches, and planning ways to earn seed money to begin citizen-funded elections in her beloved New Hampshire, and whereas she is considered by many a national treasure who still inspires today's citizens to take up her nonpartisan causes and express them through their own creative talents. And whereas Granny D. Haddock and the legacy she left continues to awaken more individuals everywhere to be unafraid of using their own power to one and benefit the common good, and thus assure that democracy will always remain a government of, by, and for the people, that the entire world can yet become a better place for all. I therefore, on this day, proclaim January 24, 2014 as Doris Granny D. Haddock Day in the state of New Hampshire, and encourage all citizens to remember and celebrate this very remarkable woman. Signed, Margaret Wood Hassan.
Good afternoon. I wasn't expecting this. That's okay, that's fine. Good afternoon. I'm Rodney Obie, and I am the college archivist at Keene State College. And I'm, of course, representing Keene State College along with my colleague Ken Goebel. And we are very pleased to receive this. This will go into the Granny D archives that is is at the home of the Granny D Archives is at Keene State, and it's a real privilege to have it. And it's been a wonderful resource for our campus community as well as the state and the region. And we've had hundreds of students use the collection and be inspired by the great work that Doris has done. And through her words and through seeing people here, I think that, it's a very powerful collection. And we're very happy to have it and to add to it. So I invite you to come to Keene State College and visit me, visit Doris's materials, and if you want to see one of her original speeches, we'll bring that out for you to see. But again, thank you very much for the proclamation, and we'll make a good home for it.
Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you John Rao. John is from New Hampshire and is a New Hampshire icon in his own right. He is a national leader for voluntary public funding of federal elections and founded the Americans for Campaign Reform to make this happen. He has had the courage to take his message and speak truth to power in the Granny D tradition, in the very halls of Congress where money politics reigns supreme. Please join me in welcoming John.
Let's hear it for Larry Lessig and the Walkers. Fantastic. Most of you in this room knew Doris Haddock. And Doris, we won't stop until it's done. Anybody disagree? I had the pleasure of walking with Doris, my wife and I, in the South. Not so cold. Damn hot. And as we approached a bridge to go to Memphis, stopped at the motel on the west side before the river, the police came. And Doris said, no, they called her Granny D. They knew who she was. And they said, you can't cross the bridge. It's not a pedestrian bridge. The police left. Doris then said, you know, instead of getting up at 6 and leaving at 7, we're up at 4:30. And we leave at 5:10. And we approached the bridge. Halfway up, top of the span, there were the police. They welcomed Doris, they smiled, and they waved us on. They knew what she was. This March, this evening, we're here to move forward on the most important public policy issue our nation faces. There are a lot of reasons, and most of you here know those reasons. But for me, the most important reason to enact public funding of our federal and presidential elections is to eliminate the money barrier to recruiting those who lead us in the United States Congress. Today, if you don't have the money, you don't have the contacts to raise the money, you don't have a famous name, the probability is you will not be asked to run, and you yourself will realize you shouldn't run the United States Congress. And look what kind of Congress we're getting. With voluntary public funding of elections, ladies and gentlemen, we can recruit the best across this nation. Community after community can search for those leaders that can lead this country well. And ultimately, we will turn this Congress around. It's a must. Let's pause for a moment. Let's not do it. Let's go home. Visualize for a moment America if we do, if we stop. I suggest that this great nation, over time, will not remain a great nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we must succeed. And together, we will succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. We have two more for the archives. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce Jim Rubens. Jim Rubens is a Renaissance man with great tenacity. Among other things, has served in the New Hampshire Senate and is currently running for U.S. Senate. He has been an outspoken and out-front truth to power person in terms of arguing that we've got to get the big money out now. He was a key player in two New Hampshire legislative committees that formulated a voluntary financing plan that is currently in the legislature. So please welcome Jim Rubens.
So this is the largest gathering I've seen during my years since 1996 of working on this issue of people looking for a solution to political reform. A couple of people in the room confirmed that. So we're pretty well in agreement here, both parties. I'm a Republican, a lot of people here are Democrats, that we've got a dysfunctional government. And it's frustrating the heck out of Americans. The frustration level has reached record levels if you look at the polls. We've got, the Pentagon has got 234 golf courses. We can't seem to get rid of that. The pharmaceutical industry, on which the federal government spends $80 billion a year. Congress forbids the federal government from negotiating for the cost of pharmaceuticals so we can have lower drug prices for folks. Congress will not allow that to happen. I think we know why. There is about $230 billion spent lobbying by that industry in 2012. Over 1,200 lobbyists infesting the halls of Congress. That explains why. We've got $100 trillion of debt and unfunded promises that Congress has known about for 30 years. Can't do anything about it. We've got too big to fail banks, bigger than ever, post the biggest crisis since the Great Depression. And we know why. You know, the federal government has been captured and controlled by special interests who control the sources of the big money that causes these strange effects. It suppresses candidates, as John Rao mentioned. It suppresses the kind of candidates we can hear from. It suppresses ideas. It suppresses debate that are solutions to many of these problems. And we can do a couple of things about this. One way is we can shift Congress so that they spend 100% of their time raising money from special interests. Maybe that'll fix the problem. We've been heading in that direction for the last 20 or 30 years. That hasn't worked out very well. The other way is to have political reform. And one keystone of the kind of political reform we need to restore government controlled by the people, of, by, and for the people, is public funding of elections. And there's a few ideas floating around now. And as many people have asked during this march, we should ask everyone running for office, every federal office, what do they plan to do about the problem? And what do they think about some of the ideas to have a public funding? We want to make this a bipartisan issue. As John Rao mentioned, this is an issue that is a foundation stone to fixing our country's long-term problems. We may not be able to fix our country's problems without getting this piece in place. Both parties should be working really, really hard on this, and I appreciate very much your folks' time and effort on this. Thank you very much.
Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Hedrick Smith. I could tell you again about his long career as a journalist, author, and documentary producer, spanning almost 60 years. That has earned him a Pulitzer Prize and several Emmys. But what I want to tell you today is that what's so extraordinary about him is that here, in the middle of winter, he is here not only to honor Granny D, but he has been touring the state in the last week, talking truth to power about how money politics has stolen the American dream. What's also I find very inspiring is that he, like Granny D, in his 80s, he's laughing, has gone from a journalist who called the balls and strikes to the pitcher who's telling us how we can solve the problem and giving us hope. So without further ado, Hedrick Smith.
Thank you, Gordy, and thank you, everyone. I want to join John Rowe and the others. I just want to take my hats off to Larry Lessig and the marchers for putting money politics on the political roadmap in New Hampshire and across the country. It is absolutely critical that this issue become number one for everybody, because no matter what other issue you want to get to, until we can get money and our political system fixed, we can't really effectively deal with the other issues. Now, you all know Granny D a lot better than I do, but I can tell you as a journalist, you gotta love somebody who does the quotes that Granny D did. I got shared some of these quotes. Anybody who can say something as delicious as this, you have to just love. The big money lobbyists put money out in the troughs each morning on K Street, and a great oinking starts up in the Capitol. Soon congressmen are all nudging each other at the troughs. It's enough to make you a vegetarian. And I got to tell you, I just met Larry this morning personally, but I've seen his videos, I've heard what he has to say, and he's like Granny D. He's talking the truth, he's organizing, he's moving people, he's bringing the nation to focus on this agenda, and I take my hat off to you, sir. I'm going around the country talking about my book, and what's interesting is how much it resonates with people. Americans are fed up, they're disgusted, they're angry, but they don't quite know what to do. And what you have done with this march is you've reminded them that the only possible way to beat organized money is with organized people. Now, the slogan here is the system is corrupted, right? No question the system's corrupted. But listen to the testimonials. We know it at the grassroots, we know it in the media, and the politicians themselves know it. John Kerry warned of corruption not of individuals, but of the whole system. Listen to what John Kerry said. We're talking about a former presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. I mean not the corruption of individuals, but a corruption of a system itself. The alliance of money and the interests that it represents. Its power is steadily silencing the voice of the vast majority of Americans. The insidious intention of that money is to set the agenda, change the agenda, block the agenda, define the agenda in Washington. John Kerry. John McCain, nominee of the other party, the Republican Party, put it far more simply and directly for damning the two major parties, in his word, for selling the country to the highest bidder. Now, in my opinion, the roots of this problem lie in the gross inequalities of income in America. They lie in the stagnation of the middle class and the rise of an extraordinarily wealthy upper 1%. The slogan 99% and 1% was put in the political lexicon in America by Occupy Wall Street. A lot of people wanted to see them achieve more, but if they achieved nothing else, they got that idea implanted, so none of us have to think about what it means, the 99% and the 1%. Let me share with you a couple of other numbers that may bring it home to you. As I got working on my book, I knew and you know that there's inequality in America. But the degree to which there is incredible. And it wasn't always that way. And by the way, our politics hasn't always been this way. And that's important, because if it wasn't all this way, somebody changed it, and we can change it back. If you go back to the period coming from World War II, The American middle class shared in the growing strength and economic prosperity and increasing efficiency of the American economy. If you take that long period of 30 years, the productivity of the American workforce rose 97%. And the median household income, the income of the average people, what you might call the beltline of the country, rose 95%. So almost dollar for dollar, the growth and the efficiency and the profits of the American economy got shared with people at average levels. And I could tell you lots more. But what is striking is that if you take the last 30 years, the productivity of the American workforce rose 80%, and the median household income rose 10%. And the main reason it rose 10% is that more women worked more hours for better pay. And if you take the average male worker in 2011, adjusted for inflation, the Census Bureau told us last year, his pay and benefits were exactly the same as in 1978. And if you take the Standard & Poor's CEO, his pay rose 300%, and at the top 1% it went up, I have different estimates, 400 to 600%. An enormous chasm has opened up. In the last 35 years, from 1978-79 to now, 84% of the entire nation's growth in income went to the top 1%. Let me try that on you again. 84% of all the added income from the entire country went to the top 1%. The top 1% today has a larger income than the GNP of Canada, than the GNP of Sweden, than the GNP of France. It's extraordinary. Now, you don't have to take that from me, or from Paul Krugman, or Paul Stiglitz, those terribly liberal Keynesian economists of academia. Citibank put out a report in 2005 to its wealthiest clients, advising them to invest in products and in companies that catered to the top 1 or 2% because so much purchasing power was concentrated in that group. And Citibank went on to say that the world has not seen such high inequality of income in a major economic power since 16th century Spain. That's 500 years. Now, how does that relate to what we're talking about today? That money is spilling right out of the top 1% into our campaigns and buying our campaigns. People think in America, average people in America, think government doesn't work. Think again. Government actually does work. It works for the people who pay it to work for them. We're talking about the 1%. So keep your eye on that ball. Keep your eye on those policies. If you look at the last 30 years, the income tax rate has gone down from 92% under Eisenhower to 77% under Kennedy to 35% under Reagan, bouncing around 35 to 39% now. So those tax rates have come down, while the payroll tax that everybody has to pay, average workers have to pay, has doubled from 3.5% to 7.65%. If you look at who got bailed out, the banks got bailed out, but the banks didn't bail out the homeowners, and Washington didn't insist on it. So the argument about money politics isn't just about how the political system operates. It's about how the government interacts with the economic system. It matters greatly to the middle of America, to the political middle and to the economic middle. It's absolutely central. And it is staggering what it's doing to us, and I'm interested in that people in both parties are talking about this. And I find this all over the country, and independents as well. What it's doing, money in politics, and I call it, by the way, I think there are two forces at work. And what you have been demonstrating for the last 11 or 12 days is people power. There's money politics. I don't say money in politics. It is one word, money politics. It is one concept. There's people power and there's money politics. And what you're doing now is interposing people power again against money politics. politics done? Think about it. Money, the distance between Washington and us all over the country. And I've been in Nebraska and Colorado and Virginia, Washington State, California, and so forth. People feel the same way at the other end of the country as you do. Money politics has driven a wedge between government and average Americans. Money politics has produced policies that favor special interests. Money politics has generated crony capitalism and gridlock. Money politics has replaced the will of the people. Remember, we began in this country with the concept that government derived its authority from the consent of the governed. We now have a system in which the leaders and the elected officials are beholden to the few who fund their campaigns. A dangerous situation. Now, Mr. Rubin was referring to the cost of the campaigns, and I was interested to stop and think about what money politics means to a politician. Because the politicians, actually, a lot of them don't like the system any better than we do. They feel trapped in it. They don't know how to get out of it. My family home for a long time was in South Carolina. And as a result, I got to know Fritz Hollings, a senator from South Carolina. And Fritz told me that when he first ran in 1976, the cost of running for a U.S. Senate seat in South Carolina was $687,000. Now, he knew the figure exactly because there was a campaign finance law passed in 1974 that actually set the limit. It actually set the limit. But the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has said money is speech, and therefore you can impose limits on the spending of money in the campaign. And so when Fritz ran for his fourth term in the 90s, the cost of a Senate campaign in South Carolina had risen to $8.5 million. I said to Fritz, what does that mean? Listen to what he said. It means I have to raise $30,000 a week every week of the 6 years of my term. So the guy gets elected and he turns around and the next day he is starting to raise $30,000 a week. Do you know 90 million American families live on $30,000 a year or less? Who do you think is able to put up $30,000 a week? That's what we're talking about. That's what we've got to stop. We have a slogan on our website, Stop Money Politics. And the two S's in stop and politics are both dollar signs. We got to stop the dollar signs. Granny D, again, good quote. The twin viral ideas that money is speech and that corporations are people. If money is speech, then those with more money have more speech. And that idea is antithetical to democracy. It makes us no longer equal citizens. What we have today is enormous disenchantment with our political system. The poll numbers are unbelievably abysmal. Congress, the president, the parties. But what's worse than that, and telltale, is that people's faith in our political system is at a low point in the last 40 years. In one of the most recent polls I saw, 60% of the people answered that the United States was in decline. Think of the pessimism and the disenchantment that represents. John Gardner, Lyndon Johnson's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, and the founding director and leader of Common Cause, before he died, said this several years ago. We are treading the edge of a precipice here. Civilizations die of disenchantment. If enough people doubt their society, the whole venture falls apart. Think of that. The whole venture falls apart. And then go back a century to Louis Brandeis, the famous comment he made, we must make a choice. We may have democracy, or we may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few. But we can't have both. So that's where we are, ladies and gentlemen. I'm with John Rao. We don't have a choice. We have to go forward. And we can. We can. And what tells us that we can go forward is our own history. I began my reporting career for United Press and for the New York Times in the South. and I was covering the civil rights movement. And if you think the odds seem long today, how many of you felt if you grew up in the black belt of Alabama, where if you looked cross-eyed, the sheriff would throw you in the jail? And then you had to have the nerve to say, I'm sitting in the front of the bus, I'm not going to the back anymore. It's a revolution. It's a revolution not just in the politics. It's a revolution in the psychology and the mindset of the people. That's where we are. We're talking about, can we have a revolution in our mindset? Can we believe again that we as a people can actually take our government back and regenerate the kind of democracy we know America can be, has been, should be, and must be? Now, I covered the civil rights movement, and along with that came a women's movement, where women said, it's not fair for us to be paid 41 cents on the dollar for doing the same work as men. And there was a consumer movement, where Ralph Nader said, unsafe at any speed, Detroit is producing cars that are defective and that are causing accidents and killing people. And other people said, we got to make packaging fair, and we got to make the food better inspected, and we got to have the Pure Food and Drug Administration doing a better job. We need to protect consumers. There was a consumers movement that demanded action from Washington. And there was a labor movement that was strong and demanded a fair social contract from big businesses all across the country. And there was a peace movement that said we got to get out of that war in Vietnam. That was all people power. All people power. There was an environmental movement. Environmental movement. Do you know that on April 22nd, 1970, 20 million Americans were in the streets, were on college campuses, were in shopping malls, saying it is outrageous that our water and our air have been fouled. It's outrageous that the Cuyahoga River is breaking into flames from all the chemicals dumped into it. It's outrageous that when you put your arm into the Potomac River, it is so polluted with nitrogen and phosphorus, there's green algae all over it, and when you pull your arm up, it's covered with green slime. 20 million people. And within 1 year, Congress had passed 7 major pieces of environmental legislation. The Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Anti-Toxic Substances Act, and on and on and on. And all of them were signed by that great environmentalist, pro-business Republican President, Richard Nixon. I happen to know Bill Ruckelshaus, who was the first head of the APA appointed by Nixon. And I said to him, Bill, did we miss something? Was Nixon actually for the environment? He said, Rick, I got to tell you, in all the years I worked for Richard Nixon, he never once asked me, Bill, is it really bad out there? He said, but he did say one thing to me. He said, when you get over there, don't get captured by those bureaucrats at EPA. Nixon was the only person in Washington who thought the nickname for the Environmental Protection Agency, which he had formed, was EPA. So I said, well, if he didn't link in, why did he do it? He said, because the people had spoken, the people demanded it, we in government had to respond. That's how democracy is supposed to work. Wow. So here we are. Here we are with a different set of problems. Our political system has been polluted by money and by gerrymandering, which we're not here to talk about tonight, but it is every bit as big a problem as our waterways and our airways were in 1970. We need to have 20 million people out on the streets in America, demonstrating, talking, demanding change. And this is the start of this march from the north down, from Dixon Notch down to here. Let me share one last thought with you before I finish from Martin Luther King. We all remember Martin Luther King delivering that magnificent speech of his in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day America will live up to its promises. I have a dream that one day my little girls will be judged by their character and not by the color of their skin. What magnificent words. I was there. It was one of the most stirring days I've ever witnessed in my life. But the first time I met Martin Luther King, he was on the ground, in his coveralls, in front of the City Hall in Albany, Georgia. He was with 20 other blacks protesting. Maybe not noticed by the nation much more than this 185-mile march that you have just done here, but beginning something important that was changing, bringing change from the belly of the land to the powers that be. Martin Luther King, as he made his way around the South, and I saw him again in Gadsden, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama, and other places, was denounced by segregationist leaders and politicians all over the South. He was denounced as an outside agitator, a troublemaker, an agitator. That was an epithet. King had the genius to say, yes, I am an agitator. Think of your washing machine. There's an agitator in there, shaking up the water, getting the dirt out of all the clothes. I say to you, you're agitators in this march. We're agitators. What we need in America today is another generation of agitators. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the best for last. And someone who really doesn't need any introduction. And I'm not going to go on in terms of the tremendous accomplishments of Professor Larry Lessig from Harvard. I just want to say two things. The first is, aren't we blessed in New Hampshire that he's made this our second home and has started the New Hampshire Movement? And secondly, in the spirit of Granny D, not only does he talk the talk brilliantly, but he walks the walk. And I did some rough calculations, and as far as I can see, he walked the walk 488,000 steps from Dixville to Nashville. And that is in the Granny D tradition of walking and speaking truth to power with your actions.
Thank you, Gordy. It is an incredible honor. It's incredibly joyful to be able to be here today with our walkers, to be able to speak after the extraordinary event, and to be able to celebrate the birthday of Granny D. It's exactly 5,503 days ago. That's, oh, of course, my technology. Right, so we're going to now hum.
And while the technology is being fixed, I just wanted to thank so much the folks here at the church for opening it up to us. And for the goodies after we finish the meal in the other room for the Riverside Barbecue, and all the folks who have donated that. And especially for Ryan Hirsch and Olivia Zink, who have done so much.
That was really well done. Thank you. All right, but you already know the beginning line, so I have to say it again, but please pretend you haven't heard it before. So here it goes. 5,503 days ago, a woman started a walk. She started in Los Angeles, and 13 months, 3,200 miles later, she arrived in Washington, D.C. That was Doris Haddock, Granny D. And on her chest as she walked was a sign for campaign finance reform. Now, 2 years later, with the help of these men, and for the younger people here, it might be a little bit confusing, because on one side you see a right-wing Republican, and on the other side you see a progressive, a left-wing Democrat. And it's weird to imagine these two people hanging out together and working together, but it was actually the case that at one point in American history, people from different sides of the political aisle could work together. And these two men did. John McCain and Senator Russ Feingold worked together after being spurred by people like Granny D to get us campaign finance reform. We got it. Campaign finance reform in the form of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002. An extraordinary accomplishment. And after we got it, the reformers were ecstatic. The problem they thought had been solved. And a movement sparked into life by an old woman's walk from home. But the lawyers didn't go home. The lawyers didn't go home. Instead, over the next decade, they worked to chip away the protections that McCain and Feingold had passed into law until in 2010, this case, Citizens United versus the FEC, was heard in the Supreme Court. And on January 21st, 2010, a year and a day after this man was sworn into office, the Supreme Court declared that the Constitution guarantees unions and corporations the right to spend as much money as they want promoting or opposing any political candidate. That was Citizens United's holding. Now, this decision by the Supreme Court was an incredible gift. We should thank them for this gift. Because it revived a certain outrage among people across the political spectrum. Larry Tribe described this as marking a major upheaval in First Amendment law. Jonathan Alter said it's the most serious threat to American democracy in a generation. It so peeved the president that he called out the Supreme Court.
With all due deference to separation of powers, last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections.
The world was angry, and it went far, sometimes too far. Here's my favorite extreme expression of outrage.
This is a Supreme Court-sanctioned murder of what little actual democracy is left in this democracy. It is government of the people, by the corporations, for the corporations. It is the Dark Ages. It is our Dred Scott.
Okay, so I love Keith as much as anybody, but if you're an African American, I imagine you hear this reference to Dred Scott, a decision that said that African Americans could never be citizens of the United States, and you might think, that goes a little far. Okay, it's not quite Dred Scott, but for our time, it is Dred Scott in the sense that it motivated, it sparked, it lit into life a movement to fight back. To fight back against, this is a technical legal term, that bad decision of the United States Supreme Court. Now, January 21st, 2010 was 3 days before Granny D's 100th birthday. One might say it wasn't actually the kindest gift that the United States Supreme Court could have given her or could have given this nation. Yet on her birthday, at the age of 100, this leader of this extraordinary movement, Granny D, said this about that decision. At her party, she said, "Thank you. That you would take time from your busy life to be here is a great gift to me, and I thank you for it. People have been asking me how I feel about the recent decision by the Supreme Court to strike down some of the campaign finance reforms that I walked for and have been working for a dozen years or so. When I was a young woman," she said, "my husband and I were having dinner at the Dundee home of a friend, Max Foster, when a young couple rushed through the door breathless to say that they had accidentally burned down Max's guest cabin down by the river. Max stood up from his meal. He set his napkin down. He smiled at the young couple and he said, 'Thank goodness. You have done me a great favor, and you don't even know it. We have been wanting to completely redo that old place, and now it will be a clean start. It will be better than ever the next time you come to stay.'" Granny D went on, "Well, I guess the Supreme Court has burned down our little house. But truth be told, it was a pretty drafty house anyway. We had not really solved the problem of too much money in politics, not hardly. And now we have an opportunity to start clean and build a system of reforms that will really do the trick. I think one of the wings of our new house will be the public financing of election campaigns. I think another wing will be a dramatic expansion of our conflict of interest and bribery laws. I think all of us, left, right, and middle, will enjoy living there without the special interests stealing us blind anymore. And I intend," Granny D said, "to be around long enough to see this new place built." Now, of course, in a sense, she was wrong. Granny D passed away 3 months after that terrible decision. But in a much more important sense, over these past 2 weeks, I've come to see just how right Granny D was. How Granny D has come back to life. Now, 4 months ago, as I was driving to Concord and struggling to decide what exactly I would say to the Coalition for Open Democracy that had invited me to come speak, I recognized the most obvious point about the future of this movement. That the future would pass through here, New Hampshire. And I got off the road and got some coffee and rewrote my presentation to include this fundamental idea, what I called the New Hampshire Rebellion. And that's the original slide. It's the original slide from that presentation. You're getting it here. And of course, the New Hampshire Rebellion was inspired in part by Granny D, but it wasn't until I came back to New Hampshire exactly 3 months ago yesterday that I understood how it would be inspired by Granny D. At that time, at that talk in Manchester, describing what the New Hampshire Rebellion would be, I said to a completely startled room that I wanted to follow Granny D, that I wanted to walk across New Hampshire from top to bottom in January. And as I looked out at the audience, as they politely smiled back, there was a certain startled terror in the room. I remember Olivia reminding me that sometimes it gets down to minus 40 degrees in the White Mountains. But then at a certain moment, a man said, "You obviously know something about New Hampshire, because you could never do this walk in the summer with the black flies." and I was quite certain that I would be alone in this walk for most of the way. It was my dream, of course, that I wouldn't be alone. Of course, my dream was that her walk, which only she completed fully, though thousands joined her for parts of the walk along the way. My dream was that her walk would inspire others to join me. But I, of course, have a lot of dreams, like for peace or for the Cubs winning the pennant, so I wasn't really counting on that much. But before I made that announcement, I had asked my wife. I said to her, so what about walking across New Hampshire? And she hesitated a bit. She said to me, well, who will run it? And I said, well, I don't know who will run it. And she said, well, if you could get Japhet to run it, then you can go. Inspired, and we called Japhet, and I asked Japhet whether he would run the walk. He knew me well enough not to say yes to me on the phone. He hung up, and he sent me a note 2 days later that says, okay, I'm on board. And the New Hampshire Rebellion's walk was set. But the question remained, on board of what? What was it we were going to do? An insane walk by an insane law professor eager for frostbite, or a walk by a community, by a team, keen to revive the movement that Granny D had started? So to answer that question, whether this would be one or two crazy souls, or a community and a team, we did the most obvious thing that anybody does in the 21st century. We sent out a tweet, which then the wonderful hero of mine, Cory Doctorow, retweeted, and then a blog post went up, and then a volunteer page, and very quickly we began building a community. And 73 days later, we were in Dixville Notch with that community. Japhet there, holding up Mary, I think, as she's slipping on this ice. Okay. So this was a walk, but notice the most important fact about this picture. This was not one person. There were 30 people who started that walk. And over the course of the 185 miles, there were 17 people who did the full walk, more than 150 people who participated at some point on this walk. There was on this walk an I. It was the I, as in I am Doris Haddock, who had inspired us, but there was also a we. A we. A we as in we are the New Hampshire Rebellion. A we as in we are G.D. Walkers. And I mean by that Granny D. Walkers. Granny D. Walkers. Now, as I walked across this incredibly beautiful state and thought about the idea of a Granny D. Walker, I recognized we should create a unit, a new unit of measurement. Let's call it a Granny D. And what is a Granny D? A Granny D is 3,200 miles. So one Granny D is 3,200 miles, and Granny D, she accomplished one Granny D, walking 3,200 miles. But when you look at what we did, you add up all the miles we walked 2 Granny Ds. We walked 6,500 in 2 weeks in January. And that's just the first time we will walk those miles. In 2015, we want 20 Granny Ds. And in 2016, here in New Hampshire, we want 200 Granny D's. In states across the United States, I want 2,016 Granny D's. Can 2016 Granny D's change our government?
Yes.
Yes. I didn't hear that. Can That's right. This is what can change our government. Now let's focus a little bit on exactly that change. The problem that Granny D set out to solve was something that she called campaign finance reform. We didn't call our problem campaign finance reform. I've come to think that way of talking about it is much too tame, much too timid, like describing an alcoholic as a person with a liquid intake problem. The problem we set out to solve was a problem of corruption. The sort of thing John McCain called a system of corruption. And by that, he didn't mean corruption in the sense of cash secreted in brown paper bags, or the sort of corruption that Rod Blagojevich engaged in. Indeed, he explicitly called the participants in that corruption good people, good souls. Good souls who had been corrupted by a system that corrupted everyone inside of Washington. And in the 15 years since, Granny D started her walk, and John McCain started his campaign in Bedford, focusing on that system of corruption. In the 15 years since, that corruption has only increased. And it's not just because that system has spun out of control to make it impossible for us to govern. It's not just because of that we need to fight that corruption. Not just because it has made it impossible to achieve the simplest of reforms, impossible to address the catastrophic problems that we as a nation have to face. But we must fight this corruption for an even more basic reason, a more fundamental reason of morality. A basic, fundamental principle of our political system. We must fight this corruption because of what it does to the equality of citizens within our republic, what it does to the dignity of citizens within our republic. Because the reality of the system that we have allowed to evolve is that it denies to us, citizens, the equal dignity of citizens within a democracy. Now, the framers of our Constitution didn't give us what they called a democracy, they called it a republic. But by a republic, they meant a representative democracy. And by a representative democracy, they meant a government with a branch that would be, quote, dependent on the people alone. Alone. So this is their model of government, the people and the government. The people and the government, an exclusive dependency. But here's the problem. Our government has allowed a different dependence to evolve, not just upon the people, but increasingly on the funders. This is a dependence too. A dependence on people who are not the people. And the reality is right now, members of Congress spend anywhere between 30 and 70% of their time raising money from those funders. And the thing we have to think about is, what does it do to them? What does it do to them as they spend their life dialing for dollars from these people they've never even met? E.F. Skinner, a psychologist at the Harvard University, gave us this image of the Skinner box, where an animal, even a pigeon, can learn which buttons to push in order to get the sustenance that it needs. We need to recognize that this is the picture of the modern American congressperson. As he learns which buttons he must push in order to get the sustenance he needs to get back to government in order to start fighting back. It is a dependence that is different and conflicting from a dependence on the people alone, so long as the funders are not the people. And in case anyone in this audience is confused, let me make this perfectly clear. The funders are not the people. The funders are not the people. The funders represent 0.05% of the people. The relevant funders of congressional campaigns are no more than 150,000 Americans. Turns out that's about the same number of people as named Lester. The internet told me that. I know it must be true. So 150,000 people are the funders, which led me in my TED Talk to call America Lesterland. That's where we live, the place where the Lesters, 150,000, are the relevant funders, the important funders of campaigns. Now, as they do this, hello, child. How are you? These are my children. Well behaved, as always. As they do this, as they spend their time raising money from 150,000 people, because they are human, they develop a sixth sense, a constant awareness about how what they do might affect their ability to raise money. They become, in the words of the X-Files, shapeshifters, as they constantly adjust their views in light of what they know will help them to raise money. Leslie Byrne, a Democrat from Virginia, described that when she went to Congress, she was told by a colleague, quote, "Always lean to the green." And to clarify, she went on, he was not an environmentalist. Now, as they do this, as they spend their time raising money, this is what they believe. If I don't win the money race, I can't win the election race. They believe that the one is necessary to win the other. And what that means, a child I haven't seen in 2 weeks, what that means is that we in America now have two elections. Two elections. This is really a challenge, Charlie. We now in America have two elections. One election is the voting election, where anyone 18 and over is allowed to vote. The other is the money election. In the voting election, all citizens get to participate. In the money election, it's the relevant funders who get to participate. And to be able to succeed in the voting election, you must do extremely well in the money election. So one election where everyone gets to participate, the other where the 0.05% get to participate. Now, if you know anything about American history, that pattern should remind you of something. Remember, there was a place we referred to as the Old South. In the Old South, there was also two elections. There were also two elections. There was a general election, and there was a white primary. And in the general election, all citizens got to vote. But in the white primary, only whites in the Democratic Party got to vote. And it took an extraordinary amount of time for the law to finally declare that the 15th Amendment's demand that race not be a restriction actually meant race should not be a restriction. It took 70 years before the law finally affirmed the right of African Americans to vote. equally with whites. But that pattern should remind you. It should remind you of this. Because we have recreated the white primary. We've recreated the white primary in the money primary. But unlike in the South, where it was 88% who got to participate in the white primary, in our white primary, the green primary, it's 0.05% who get to participate. 0.05% who get to decide the conditions under which candidates have a chance to run in the general election. Now that is a betrayal of the ideals of equal citizenship. It is a betrayal of what it means to be equal citizens, because we have allowed a system to develop which denies us the same role as everyone else in this democracy. Now there's a fight. There is a fight to restore. It is as difficult, as Hendrik said. It is maybe more difficult. And we have a long way to go. But how will we get there? On this walk, someone reminded me of the title to Nelson Mandela's autobiography, which he described as the long walk to freedom. The walk to freedom. It's that walk we must focus on. Because we need to remember how central the walk as a form of political protest has been across the history of our country and across the history of democracies around the world. Because in the dignity of walking, standing against the indignity of disenfranchisement and the indignity of inequality, we express the justice that we have been denied. Remember one more walker. This man, Lonnie Smith. Dr. Lonnie Smith. Dr. Lonnie Smith lived in Harris County, Texas during the time of the white primary. And every election, he would walk from his house the miles to the polling place. He would pay his poll tax, and he would say to the poll worker, "I would like my ballot." And the poll worker would say, "Dr. Smith, you know you have no right to vote." And he would turn around and peacefully walk home. And people would see him in his dignity, walking and paying his poll tax. And that act would remind them of the indignity of that society. And so too is it with us. In the act which she began, we continue. We continue in this to remind everyone, as they see us on the road, of the indignity, of the inequality that we have allowed to develop in our society. And like the thousands across history who have walked to protest that indignity, we learn in this act about the bonds of community that walking creates. As we've walked, as the walkers in this room crossed the 185 miles, we built bonds between us. We became brothers and sisters. Some of us started that walk in memory of Granny D. Others of us started that walk in memory of my sweet friend, Aaron Swartz. But regardless, after the 2 Granny Ds, as we arrive here, we are now one. We are now one group, one community, one team, on the way to the freedom that our democracy has owed us for the last 30 years. Now, as I think back across these incredible 2 weeks, I can't begin to describe the feelings of respect and bond that I have found with these friends who have walked together with me. They taught me, they teach me, they tease me, they challenge me. On Wednesday, I had to get up at 4 in the morning to finish a presentation and then walk 17 miles and then race to a place to make the presentation. And I made the presentation, and afterwards I get off the stage and Bruce walks up to me and he says, "That was a double." I said, "What?" He said, yeah, you've been hitting a whole series of singles, that was a double. I thought, with friends like this. But we have built this community, this commitment together, and this is what they have shown. They've shown us something which was central to what Granny D taught. They have shown me, most clearly, love.